Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
It is Season 4, Episode 37, October 16th, a victory week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They defeat the Los Angeles Chargers on Sunday Night Football by a final score of 24-17. A victory, a big victory, but it comes at a steep and heavy price in the form of a season-ending injury for defensive lineman Stephon Tuitt. A torn pec is the injury that he suffered. He exited shortly after I think he only played about 5 or 6 snaps. And Tuitt, a player that has been playing his best season so far, will miss the remainder of the season. It's a devastating blow to a defense that was finally starting to gel, and they have adequate replacements, but Tuitt was playing his best season, was having his best season to date, and I don't really think there's much arguing that. How do you describe the type of loss that not having Tuitt in there will bring?
No, this is a huge loss. I thought Tuitt was having his best year since getting drafted into Pittsburgh, and I thought he was finally having that breakout year where he was playing at actual elite pass rusher level, and it's just unfortunate to lose him now. I mean, you just got to be hopeful. It's next man up. You got to hope for Javon Hargrave, Tyson Alualu, and Isaiah Buggs to step up here and fill in for the now down Stephon Tuitt. I have hopes for Javon Hargrave getting a little bit more playing time, and if Tyson Alualu does what he did against the Chargers last night, if he continues that, I hate to say it, but we wouldn't even feel Stephon Tuitt being gone because Alualu had a great game. But I don't expect that to keep up. Losing to it was a big, big loss.
And that's the thing about Stephon Tuitt is that over the years we've seen him have games and we've seen him have moments where he seemed really dominant, but we've never seen him put it together like he had this season. I think he was actually having an all-pro caliber worthy performance. Pound for pound, I think he's been the Steelers' best player this year on both sides of the ball.
Really? See, I give it to T.J. Watt. I think Watt has been constantly there on the pass rushing, but I do think Tuitt has been a very good addition.
I don't think you can really go wrong with either. If you wanted to say 1A, 1B, I think that's fine too. Look, regardless, I think he's been the best lineman, and other than Watt, I can't really think of anyone that's played as well as Tuitt.
Nope. No, definitely not. Definitely not on offense, really.
And you might remember the injury that Cameron Hayward suffered in 2016 that caused him to miss the rest of that season. Now, I know it's too early to talk about next season, but I still have some hope that Tuitt will be able to return at least to a high level of play, because Hayward's best statistical season came the year after he suffered that season-ending pec injury. So, is there still some good upside with Tuitt for having a great season next year?
I think so. Torn pecs aren't the worst thing to come back from. I mean, yeah, it's bad to be on either side of the line with a torn pec since you use your chest a lot to push and stuff like that. But Cameron Hayward's been fine since then. Like you said, he had his best season to date right after the year he was out with the torn pec. And Stephon Tuitt should be healthy before even training camp happens. So I think he'll be good. I think he'll be fine.
So the silver lining of all of this should be that we're going to probably see some Isaiah Buggs now, and we haven't really seen much of him this year.
Nope. Well, it's going to be interesting. We're going to have to see how the Steelers react with their new addition. They might continue to keep Buggs on the sideline and instead use a familiar face in LT Walton. I kind of hope not, but I think it's possible. It depends on how they view Walton after not playing for 10 months.
And what Austin is alluding to is the fact that to replace Stephon Tuitt, the Steelers moved him to IR. They didn't bring up Henry Mondeau. What they did is they signed former reserve defensive lineman LT Walton. This is now his second stint with the Steelers. Excuse me. So you're talking, do you think there's a chance that Walton would get the hat over Buggs at this point?
there's a chance. I feel like they might opt for a veteran guy, even though he's not really a good pass rusher. He was just always just a guy that was a decent rotational piece, maybe against the run and stuff. But it's going to be interesting to see what they decide to do.
We should learn a lot more in the coming weeks about what the Steelers think of Isaiah Buggs. But in the meantime, there were several other injuries of a lesser degree, especially on the defense, that felt like it took its toll over the course of the game. T.J. Watt had an injury. Joe Hayden left during the game, and James Conner also left briefly, but was noticeably absent on the Steelers' last offensive possession. Mike Tomlin said that they're all going to be limited in some capacity next week when the team is returning from their bye, preparing for the Miami Dolphins game. So I guess this bye week came at the perfect time.
Oh, without a doubt. It surprised me that he said that they'd be limited going into next week. It means their injuries are pretty substantial. I'm sure if they had a game this week, they would be forcing themselves through it. But, I mean, the fact that they're going to be limited early on next week, that's a good sign that the bye week came at the perfect time.
More good news about the bye is that Mike Tomlin is hopeful that both fullback Roosevelt Nix and wide receiver James Washington can start practicing as well. Nix hasn't played since injuring his knee in week 1, and Washington hasn't played. He got injured in the Ravens game, right?
Yeah, he just hasn't played this past week.
Excuse me. So the thought was he might miss about a month, and it looks like if he returns to practice, he might only miss 3 games, so it would be a quick recovery time for him. And more good news is that quarterback Mason Rudolph has finally cleared the concussion protocol, and Mike Tomlin said that he's going to be the starting quarterback when he returns from his injury, which of course means that he will be starting against the Miami Dolphins following the bye week. So good news on that front as well. So with that in mind, it looks like Devlin Hodges will be going back to the bench, and I feel like that's the perfect place to start with this. You've got a rookie undrafted free agent starting his first NFL game. Granted, it wasn't really a home game, but it was on the West Coast, the first time Hodges had played on the West Coast, and the Steelers typically struggle on the West Coast. They're 1-4, and you're facing a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback in Phillip Rivers, and Hodges wasn't great, but he did exactly what the Steelers needed him to do, and I felt like it was very reminiscent in terms of an offensive game planning standpoint to what we saw 2 weeks ago against the Bengals, and it was executed pretty well. I don't really have any major complaints. I think Hodges maybe made 1 to 2 poor decisions or throws, and at the end of the day, he did what he had to do to win the game.
Yeah, the first play of the game wasn't good. It probably would have been a long gain to Juju. Obviously, we saw him underthrown by quite a bit. Juju almost worked back and got that ball, but that was really one of the only mistakes. Obviously, he did have the interception against him, and that. But other than that, it was pretty fine. The only other one that I remember is when he almost got Deontay Johnson killed. He made an ill-advised throw. Granted, it got a lot of flags for it, so take that as you will. And Johnson did not enter the concussion protocol by some way or somehow. I guess he was probably trying to sell it to the refs because he was rolling on the floor. I thought he was going to be concussed as heck. He got hit straight in the helmet, but those are the only throws I could think of Devlin Hodges actually making a bad pass,
Yes, and to that point, I actually really liked the decision to throw deep on the first play of the game.
Oh, I love that too. I loved it, and it worked almost perfectly. Juju made a great route running break on the ball, great route running break on his release, and it would have gone for a lot of yards had Devlin Hodges hit him in stride. But that was the thing about Devlin Hodges. He doesn't have that good of an arm, so I mean, I wasn't too mad about it.
I think you could also attribute that to nerves too, probably.
Yeah, that too.
So once Hodges settled in, he was the perfect game manager that you would want out of your number 4. I guess he's technically the number 3. I've been calling him the number 4 just because he was the number 4 quarterback when Josh Dobbs was in Pittsburgh. Am I being too hard on him calling him the number 4? Is he really the number 3?
I don't know. I kind of usually just go back and forth. Usually when I talk about him, he was the 4th-string quarterback going into the preseason. Now I call him quarterback 3 because, technically right now he's quarterback 2. But you know, I guess by that point, since we're counting Roethlisberger, I guess he really is quarterback 4.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. It's not a big deal. It's just something I'm now wondering if I should be more correct about it. But regardless, Hodges is a guy that nobody thought was going to be taking meaningful snaps this year. And here he is, less than a month after looking at possibly playing in the XFL to his first NFL start and a win. This could be the last time Devlin Hodges ever plays in the NFL. I mean, I hate to be blunt about it, but it happens. I mean, look at what happened to Max Hall, and Matt McGloin played a few games as well. But, you know, these careers could be short. This could be his one shot, and I thought he represented himself well, just like he did last week.
Yeah, I agree. I think he did well in his position, and he had a week to kind of prove himself and show why he deserves to stay in Pittsburgh for longer, or maybe he put out a script for another team to look at him down the line if he ever gets cut. So I think he did a good job representing himself. And
of course, with the quarterback and Hodges shouldering a little bit of the load, the team, of course, had to help carry him. Not that he didn't hold his own in some respects, but the Steelers knew that they were going to have to step up in other areas. And let's start with the defense, because that is a unit that has finally, even with the injury to Tuitt, has finally come together over the past few weeks, and they've played very well, forcing a 3-and-out on the Chargers' first series, and then the ill-advised toss, if you will, the lateral from Rivers to Melvin Gordon, which was a perfectly timed blitz by Vince Williams, I should add. The ball floating in the air and was actually a backwards pass, which Devin Bush alertly scooped up as Vince Williams walked past it. Bush scooped it up and took it into the end zone. I didn't think that was going to be a good touchdown, but originally, but when I saw the replay, it was clearly a backwards pass. And Devin Bush scores his first NFL touchdown, and the very next drive, the Steelers forced another 3-and-out. Not a 3-and-out. They forced an interception on a tip pass from Tyson Alualu, and again, it's Devin Bush on the receiving end of this one, and the rookie comes up with 2 turnovers right away, and the Steelers are set up in prime position and eventually take a 14-0 lead right out of the gate.
Yeah, that's what you like to see, capitalizing off those turnovers. Only one did the offense get to capitalize off of. Obviously, Devin Bush got the touchdown on the other one, but points off of turnovers is big, and you had 14 points off of turnovers right off the bat. And that's something we were harping on this team, and it was really good to see that they were able to get both touchdowns off of those 2 turnovers.
What more can you say about Devin Bush? And again, it's tough to not compare him to Ryan Shazier, but Ryan Shazier didn't have huge turnover numbers in college. He wasn't a huge stat padder. Neither was Devin Bush, but they had the raw skills, they had the speed. And Devin Bush, after having, I think 1 interception in college, and Ryan Shazier had 1 interception in college, they're translating. So now Bush has 2 interceptions in his young NFL career that's not even half a season old, and he has a touchdown in his just his 6th NFL game. He really has been, I think, everything that the Steelers have hoped for, and I actually think more so, because you might remember it took Ryan Shazier about 2.5 years to become the player that we knew when he suffered his spinal injury. Now, a part of that was due to injuries, of course, but I feel like Bush has already become as much as we could have hoped for and more.
Yeah, it was definitely worth every penny. Those 2 third-round picks and the first-round pick the Steelers gave up was worth it every time. I'd do that trade all over again. And honestly, if we had to go back and every team get to know what was happening, I'd do that trade and more if I knew this is what it was going to be like. Because Devin Bush has worked out swimmingly. Granted, he did make some mistakes later in the game, but he's on pace to be the defensive rookie of the year for sure, and he's been an amazing part of the Steelers defense, exactly what they needed after last year.
And you touched on his struggles. He was actually exactly like what I remembered from Ryan Shazier, all those highlight reel plays and the frustrating missed tackles as well. Now, Bush did struggle a bit, but it came after he suffered an ankle injury where he was noticeably not playing as well, but he still was good enough with those highlight reel plays to earn Defensive Player of the Week. And like you said, I really think that he is the favorite to win Defensive Rookie of the Year right now. He looks like the lead candidate at this point. And the other Devin in Tampa Bay, not that I don't know if he's been bad per se, but he certainly hasn't been as impactful as Devin Bush has been.
I'll say it over and over. Devin White's going to bust. He's going to be 4 years and out in Buccaneers. I mean, granted, part of it's because he was injured so early on in this year, but I'm telling you, his college team was so unimpressive. I have no idea what everyone else saw.
So for the time being, the Steelers' defense coming together, giving the Steelers 7 points and then setting them up with prime field position at the Chargers' 40-yard line. We saw a nice, efficient drive, mostly through James Conner, who he touched the ball on all those on every play of the drive: a 2-yard run, a 4-yard pass, a 12-yard run, a 2-yard run, a 4-yard run, a 4-yard pass, and then finally the 12-yard run off the left side of the line, where I think he might have been untouched until he got to the goal line. Just a great drive, reminiscent again of that Bengals game where the Steelers were living through their running backs.
Yeah, it was definitely ground pound football, and I definitely enjoyed it a lot. James Conner just felt like, I think we talked about this on the podcast, but if we didn't, early on in the season when James Conner was struggling, he was ranked as like the worst out of all running backs at breaking tackles. I felt like he's come alive these past 2 weeks. This week, against the Chargers, he couldn't be tackled. He refused. Anyone touched him, he was like, no. He's like, get off. And just kept going, and it was really good to see from him. Benny Snell did also pretty good in that regard. He was bouncing off some tackles as well. And honestly, really, looking at the stats, it feels surprising. It feels like James Conner definitely rushed for more. He had 60 carries for 41 yards. I don't know if that tells the whole story, because it really felt like Conner was dominant out there. I know he led the team in receptions, 7 for 78, and that makes more sense. I felt like Conner was dominant on both sides of the ball, even though the yards per carry is not going to say that.
I think some of his carries in the second half were runs that lost yards, and of course we know that Snell had most of the carries at the end of the game. I agree with you, though. This is a case where the numbers don't really tell the whole story, because he was running with authority, especially early in the game. He was just, like you said, he refused to go down. I think he broke something like 5 tackles, at least during the game. I can't remember the exact number, but there were several occasions, specifically on a couple of receptions, where he just broke tackles and kept going, and it was very nice to see. And after the Steelers forced another punt from the Chargers, just an 18-yard drive, the Chargers at this point have had 4 drives that have ended in a punt, a touchdown for the defense, an interception, and now another punt. The Steelers start from their own 14-yard line, and they go on what might be their most impressive drive of the season when you consider that Devlin Hodges was starting at quarterback. And you've got a 14-play, 86-yard drive that takes up 9 minutes. It started at the end of the first quarter, and it goes through most of the second quarter, and you end it with a touchdown, which is Devlin Hodges' first NFL touchdown, a pass to James Conner that he takes 26 yards into the house and makes it 21-0. And at this point, I was wary of last year's hot start against the Chargers. As you might remember, it was a 14-0 lead that turned into 23-7, and of course the Steelers ended up losing that game, but this did feel a little different. I felt a lot better about the way the Steelers' defense was playing, and to have such a great early start by the defense and then for your offense to go and rip off a 9-minute drive and make it a 3-score game, it really felt like the pinnacle of the game, and I felt as though at this point that the Steelers were definitely winning.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that. I had that same thought in my head. I was like, the Chargers are going to come back. Like this, we saw the script last year. I felt like that there's anything could happen still. But I think actually after that field goal later in the third is when I felt safe. I didn't feel safe at 21-0 yet. I was still thinking of last year.
Well, the Chargers went in at the end of the half, and they actually doinked a field goal off the upright by McLaughlin, the rookie, which we apparently he went over our heads because we didn't even know he existed.
Yeah, honestly, it was such a surprise when I saw the kicker come out. I was like, that's not Ty Long. Like I literally don't know when it happened. I didn't remember seeing it. I went and looked at their depth chart and didn't remember seeing that there. felt obviously it was there, and I just wasn't paying good enough attention. But like, I just felt like I thought it had been Ty Long, and the entire way, I had no idea when they signed this guy.
So the Steelers come out of the first half with a shutout, and in the second half they get the ball to start, and again another big time drive. They hold the ball for another 6 minutes and 48 seconds, 13 plays and 73 yards. They get down to the Chargers' 2-yard line. It's 1st and goal. The first 2 plays don't go anywhere, and then on the 3rd down, it was a weird game for Marquise Pouncey. He had, I think, 3 or 4 different bad snaps. This one was the worst of all, though. It went between Hodges' legs, and this actually might have been Devlin Hodges' best play of the game. He was able to run back, alertly retrieve it, and he didn't take a sack to back the Steelers up. He didn't fire it into the end zone, fire an ill-advised pass. He didn't spike it into the ground for an intentional grounding. He fired it out of bounds perfectly where no one could have gotten it. So it was the perfect play, and yeah, you would have liked the Steelers to come away with the touchdown, but I don't have any problem with the Steelers kicking a field goal there because it's still technically a 3-point or 3-score game if the Chargers go for 2 for all 3 touchdowns that they would need, but I think kicking the field goal there is the right decision.
No, it made sense. And I think that when you're up 21-0 late in the third, it just made sense to just go up that little bit extra 24-0. Because, I mean, is the 4 extra points going to really make the difference to make them score? Because you're already the chances are already low to score 3 touchdowns in a row and get 2-point conversion on every single one. That's a pretty low chance when you put up no points through that so far in the game. I mean, granted, we saw like a fourth quarter like comeback almost, but still, it was the right choice to go for the field goal there.
So yeah, then we saw the Steelers' offense kind of sputter for the rest of the game. They didn't. I think they only gained 25 yards on or no more than 25 yards on either of their remaining 5 drives. The Chargers were able to get things going though. They were able to pick up a field goal towards the end of start of the fourth quarter. And then the Steelers gave the Chargers life for the first time all game with an interception from Devlin Hodges, intended for Johnny Holton, picked off by Rayshon Jenkins at the Chargers' 22-yard line. So, have you had a chance to look at that play? I was conflicted on who I wanted to blame. I think it's fair to criticize both Hodges and Johnny Holton on this play.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think Johnny Holton could have worked back and helped his undrafted free agent quarterback, but it wasn't a great throw by Hodges either, so it really was on both, to be fair. But, I mean, just a fun fact, I misquoted. I said that going into this week, targeting Johnny Holton was 0 for 7. That made it 0 for 5. So it's 0 for 5 with 1 penalty and 1 interception now. So take that as you will.
He has to be closing in on some sort of record here, though.
You know what's funny? The Steelers' record for the most targets without a catch is 0 for 8, and it's tied with about 3 people. And the NFL record is set by a Patriot who is 0 for 10. I saw a tweet that actually went over this just for Johnny Holton. I can't remember the players' names. I remember that there's like 2 tied for it that are Steelers at 0 and 8, and there's a Patriot that's 0 and 10. But obviously these guys are the Patriots definitely a no name. The Steelers players I can't really remember all too well.
We'll have to see if we can dig that up at some point, but for the time being, of course, just an interesting tidbit. So this is when the Chargers offense comes to life. They're able to turn that interception into a touchdown on a 10-play, 70-yard drive, and this is where things started to fall apart for the Steelers defense, partially due to injury. Hunter Henry went off in this game. He caught, I think, all but one of his targets for 100 yards, and I think 2 touchdowns. Was it 2? Yeah, 2 touchdowns. The Steelers all of a sudden didn't have any answers. There were communication breakdowns, there were missed tackles, there were guys running free in the secondary. Phillip Rivers was floating passes in the middle of the field, which you should really never do, but the Steelers weren't making them pay for it. What did you make of the sudden change in the defense?
Just, it looked like they were getting tired out, or maybe just underestimating their opponent. I don't know. There's a lot of plays where I watched that the tackling wasn't good, like especially from Devin Bush. I mean, you also had that stupid taunting penalty that he got. Not just to blame on Devin Bush, though. The tackling at the end didn't get that good. And, I mean, you lost Joe Hayden, you lost T.J. Watt at the end of the game. It it's going to impact you. Losing T.J. Watt, especially for that final 2 minutes, was pretty rough. But I mean, honestly, I can't even really blame Joe Hayden going out, because what that meant is Cameron Sutton got to play more, and Cameron Sutton went off. Cameron Sutton had a heck of a day, even though his stats aren't crazy or anything. I think it's more of the stats that weren't caused by him that was very impressive. But regardless, the injuries did contribute, and I think losing T.J. Watt for the end probably helped the Chargers a little bit. But it felt like they were just getting lazy out there, and I didn't like that.
I think that's partially it, but I also think that we saw more miscommunications because a guy like Joe Hayden wasn't on the field. Even if Cameron Sutton wasn't the problem per se, the fact of the matter is the Steelers, when Hayden and Watt went out of the game, the Steelers were -4 defensive starters at this point. So you've got guys in the secondary playing more than they have ever before, at least this season, and you've got more miscommunications. I think that just kind of alludes to the possibility that you've got guys that haven't been working together very much, and why I think maybe we saw guys running free more in the second half than we had earlier in the game. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we can get into Cameron Sutton in a little bit here, but what do you think about Artie Burns in this game?
Oh, he's okay. He definitely the first pass of the game straight up attacked him right off the bat. It was a completion of Hunter Henry for, I believe, 13 yards. It might have been 12. But then throughout the game, he got kind of picked on a little bit. He gave up a big pass to Mike Williams late in the game. But it's just that I think that Artie Burns is just always going to be okay. He's going to give up those big plays. He's going to look okay at times, but overall, average to below average in this game, somewhere in between there probably, because I can't really say he had a terrible game. It wasn't Artie Burns getting burnt style game. It happened a couple times. Nothing too dramatic in this game. But that's how I felt. How did you feel?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when we think about Artie Burns bad, we think about the guy that gives up those huge plays, the guy that, even though he's in good position, will mug the receiver, turning into a 50-yard pass interference play, the guy that just takes stupid penalties. For most guys, this wouldn't be a great game. Not that he did play well, but I thought he was perfectly fine, and you can live with what he did. I actually thought he kept a lid on things for the most part of 3 quarters. But, of course, you can't play it that way. You have to play it the full 60 minutes. But I did think for the most part he did keep a lid on things.
Yeah, I thought he did okay. I mean, he did get a penalty, too, that illegal hand to the face penalty. But, yeah, he did okay.
Hey, illegal use of hands to the face. If what we saw on Monday night is true, then the face is really everywhere.
It is true.
So the Chargers were able to get touchdowns on back-to-back drives. Excuse me. And the Steelers ended up forcing the Chargers to take all 3 of their timeouts with just over a minute remaining. Probably the best special teams play of the season, a perfectly executed punt and down punt by Jordan Berry and Johnny Holton at the Chargers' 1-yard line, and the Steelers were able to get an interception 2 plays later. First off, a very tough interception by Mike Hilton that he dropped. That would have been a very impressive play. And then the very next play, Phillip Rivers goes deep down the left side. He overthrows his receiver, Mike Williams, and Cam Sutton's there to pick it off, and the Steelers are able to hold on. So, wouldn't be a Steelers game if they didn't make it nerve-wracking for you at the end, but they were able to come away with the victory. I was kind of surprised. I know that there was only a minute left, but I thought the Chargers might try to work out of their end zone a little bit instead of just Rivers airing it out 50 yards down the field on both the first 2 plays.
Yeah, especially Rivers didn't really have that great of a day. He wasn't very accurate, and his decision-making wasn't all too great. So I don't know. It seems a little bit interesting, but, it worked out for the Steelers, so I'll take it.
I think this is a prime example of how a pass rush early in a game can affect you. You look at the Steelers' final stat line in terms of a pass rushing perspective. Chickillo and Watt split 1 sack. Oh, by the way, that was I thought Anthony Chickillo played well in his return, by the way.
Yeah, besides that dropped pick, but yeah.
Yeah, He should have caught that. That was a little harder than I think it was supposed to, than it looked. But yeah, he should have caught that. And even though the Steelers finished with 1 sack, I think they were in Rivers' head early and often, and I think that partially contributed to his errant day.
Oh, yeah, I mean, dude was hit 4 times by T.J. Watt. I mean, he almost forced a fumble, T.J. Watt did. 4 times by Watt, 1 time by Anthony Chicklow, obviously that split sack, and Tua hit him once before even leaving the game, and Tua played about 5 snaps, so he definitely had been feeling the pass rush throughout the day.
And then as far as the running game goes, the Steelers were able to shut down both Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. Neither guy eclipsed 20 rushing yards on the day, and Gordon only had 3 catches for 30 yards, while Eckler had 3 for 14. So they were able to keep a lid on the running backs too, and that's what I was mostly worried about, besides Mike Williams on Artie Burns, was how the Steelers would contain the running backs, and they shut both of them down with ease.
Yeah, I was very impressed. Honestly, I was mostly happy with Eckler being kept to 3 catches for 14 yards. I mean, you look at Melvin Gordon getting 3 for 30, and that's not as good. But, I mean, Eckler was who I'm more worried about in the passing game. Melvin Gordon getting it is usually just a dump-off, and Melvin Gordon's going to make a good move because he's the better running back like that. But I was happy seeing that Eckler was kept at 3 for 14, and then the rushing statistics were even worse, 5 carries for 14 yards. I mean, he broke off, I think, 2 big ones and then just ended up losing yards later. He had an 11-yard gain, I remember, in the second half. But other than that, I was really happy.
Benny Snell, I thought he played pretty well. He had most of the carries at the end of the game and actually finished with 75 yards, including a 20-yard run. Has your thoughts on Snell as a player changed at all, or just kind of what you expected, or maybe a little better than what you expected, but you're not moving the needle just yet?
Better than what I expected, but I'm not moving the needle too far. I'm moving it up, but I'm not moving it too far yet because coming into this game, I knew that the Chargers weren't going to be that good of a team against the rush. So how I was feeling was, he rushed better than James Conner on paper. So you could take it as that if you want. 17 carries for 75 yards, a 4.4 average. So that's definitely impressive. I'm less going to wait. I want to see a little bit more out of him. Jalen Samuels is going to be out. Honestly, I might not be able to get what I want because he's going to play Miami next, and Miami's even worse than what I thought of the Chargers. The Chargers I didn't like very much, but I didn't think that they were terrible. Miami's literally like the worst rush defense in the league. So if Benny Snell runs for like 300 yards, I'm going to be like, not yet. It doesn't even matter. But and that's the problem. After that, Jalen Samuels should come back, and then you're not going to really see Snell get those carries unless it's like goal line situation or something like that. But they might even opt to use Rosie Nix instead. I don't know. I feel like I haven't seen Rosie Nix actually run the ball in quite a while. But, we'll have to see what happens when everyone's healthy, the fullbacks and the running backs.
Indeed, there's still time. One thing I was thinking about that I actually want to point out to you or maybe ask a question about is the fact that Snell had all those carries late. Now, this partially could have been due to the injury to James Conner, but what do you make of it? Do you think it's possible that they used Snell at the end because, A, James Conner's been, he's had a few fumbles in his career in crucial situations, including once this year, and B, because Benny Snell football originated in Kentucky as a closer, as a guy that closed out games for the Kentucky Wildcats?
Honestly, I thought it was more just because James Conner was injured. That's honestly what I thought about it. How about you?
Actually, I do agree with you. I see people kind of spinning it this way, but I feel like James Conner's the guy, and I don't think the Steelers would... I don't think they're that concerned about it where they thought it was going to be an issue.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, then. Is there anything else from the... we have the 5 plays to circle. We'll get to that in a minute. 2 stats I wanted to throw at you, Austin, that I think are really telling of the way this team performed, about why they played well and why the defense, even though they bent at the end there, something that was encouraging to see. 2 encouraging stats. Number 1 is the Steelers' time of possession. They outpossessed the Chargers 34 minutes to 25, almost 26 minutes. I think that might be the first time that's happened all year besides the season opener.
Yeah, honestly. Feels good, man.
And then number 2, Steelers finished 8 for 13 on third down conversions. I need to remember here exactly what it was. Remember they had converted only 3 third downs in every game this year? You remember that?
Yes.
Well, they converted 2 on their second drive, which was that short field touchdown, and they converted their third on the first third down of that long 14-play drive, and they converted another one later in the drive. So they broke their team record this season in terms of third down conversions with 10 minutes left in the second quarter. So that's really good.
It feels good, but it's really sad, actually. It feels good now, but I'll take 8 for 13 over 3 for 11 or 3 for 9 any day.
Absolutely. They were 8 for 11 at one point, so they didn't convert the last 2, but they were on fire, and that's encouraging to see. Hopefully it's something that we can continue to see as we move forward. So, you ready for the 5 plays to circle?
Sure.
Actually, you kind of took the lead on putting this one together, so do you want to take the lead on this?
Yeah, sure. So I put the 5 plays. I chose some bad ones, some good ones. The one that I want to start off with first is I want to start off with Cameron Sutton because there's 2 of him on here. That onside recovery with 1:29 left in the fourth was amazing. It was a great play. Mike Tomlin even showed up, said something about it in his presser, and it was a really good catch. And I mean, the man landed on his head. It was almost an injury. It could have been an injury for him, but it just capped off his didn't cap off his really great play. We'll get to the next one right now, and that's Cam Sutton's game-ending interception. The second 10 at the LA Chargers 1, Philip Rivers throws a pass way too far past his intended receiver, Mike Williams, and Cameron Sutton makes a pretty interception, almost a similar one that Mike Hilton couldn't make a few plays earlier, and obviously that was another one. After that, I wanted to look at the Devlin Hodges interception. We obviously saw it intended for Johnny Holton, and we saw both players kind of make a mistake there, so I thought that was important to remember because we can't just look at good stuff here. And then the last 2 are Devin Bush. You have that fumble touchdown from Bush that happened early on in the game on 2nd and 10 with 10:51 to go in the first. He got that 9-yard fumble return, and he had the awareness to pick up the fumble, even though a lot of players around him didn't. And then the other thing I wanted to circle was the Tyson Alualu blocked pass that led to an interception. Alualu had probably his best game as a Steeler. Obviously, this pass, it was 1st and 10 at the LA Charger 44, with 8:59 to go in the first, and Philip Rivers made what looked like a good pass, but Alualu got up there. Alualu jumped and got his hand so high up, gave Bush the ability to intercept that, return it for 6 yards, and those are my 5 plays I wanted to point out.
Well, which one do you want to talk about first? We don't need to necessarily talk. I was thinking we could go in depth a little bit. The Hodges interception we kind of already did, so I don't think we need to touch on that one. But you want to go in order here?
Of how I said it? Sure.
All right, so the Cam Sutton onside recovery then. I actually thought that was his most impressive play of the game. And I remember him jumping up and getting flipped up in the air and immediately being concerned that he might have gotten hurt because he put himself in a vulnerable position, and that might have been the best executed onside kick by a kicker that I've seen in a long time.
It was really good. It almost worked. It was, kickers are 0 for 16 on it this year, but it got perfectly 10 yards, exactly where it needed to be. Gave them the chance, and it was really honestly, Cam Sutton just made a really great play on it. Just a really great catch, and he maintained it as he fell, like, upside down.
And wasn't it Trey Edmonds that actually laid maybe a potentially life-saving block there, too?
It was Trey Edmonds. Trey Edmonds did probably save Cameron Sutton's life.
Your man's already making plays. It's nice to see him back on the roster.
Yeah, man, I love him on special teams.
So that was obviously huge. The Steelers were able to keep the ball and were able to force the Chargers to use those 3 timeouts, which eventually turned into the Steelers pinning the Chargers on the 1-yard line. That could be like almost an honorable mention as that pinning, but we talked about the Cam Sutton interception. Oh, one other thing I wanted to point out, nothing personal against Artie Burns, of course, but I wouldn't have a problem if the Steelers decided, I know he's not really an outside corner as the Steelers see him, but I wouldn't have a problem with him being the first guy off the bench on the outside.
I want it, but there's some reason they're not. And I'm thinking it's because in the past they've had him there and they had him come off the bench and they just didn't like it. So I have a feeling that they just think his skill set is best for inside and playing at the nickel or the slot.
And so, I guess I can't argue too much because he's been fantastic at it this year.
Yeah, so that's my worry. I want him to be the first guy off the bench, but I feel like the Steelers don't deem him good enough for that position. They feel like he's really best for that inside position.
We talked a little bit about the first touchdown, that backwards pass. Always jump on the ball, always pick it up. The officials have finally gotten a little bit better about not blowing the play dead. We've seen them do that in the past. They're generally allowing the play to continue now, and you've just, when in doubt, don't be afraid to pick it up, And I'll never forget, and I know my mom will remember this play, a Steelers game against the Ravens in the playoffs where Roethlisberger was hit, and it looked like an incomplete pass, but the Ravens jumped on the ball. The play was never whistled dead, and it ended up being a touchdown, whereas if anybody had paid attention and jumped on the ball, that might not have happened. So always be alert, and it's nice to see that the rookie, of all people, is the one that's aware of that and is able to take it in for 6 points. That's a very heads-up play. And it should be the standard, but, it's not all the time. So it's nice to see.
It's really weird. It's like a problem that never leaves any level of football. Any level. High school, middle school, college, NFL, and the XFL and AF. It never leaves. Players there's nothing hurting them to pick the ball up at all or just try. And they still just, this one's not going to be it. I don't get it. I really don't get it. To me, it seems like such an easy rule to learn, and it afflicts every level of football.
And the risk-reward. The risk-reward is what? What are you risking by doing it? And the reward is everything.
Exactly. That changes the game. It's literally a game-changing play. It's better than basically anything else you could do on defense, is getting a turnover. I don't know, man. I don't really get it, how this is a problem that afflicts all of football.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things, I guess. It's just something that happens. So, props to Devin Bush for being able to come up with it. And, of course, he came up with that interception, too. That was a heads-up play as well. But you mentioned Tyson Alualu's deflection there. I felt like that's something you could do with Phillip Rivers. He does have that lower-angled sidearm, three-quarters type delivery. And Alualu got his arm up in there, and he was all over the place on Sunday night, too. He played really well. But, again, just an alert veteran play. You have to know that if you're not going to get there, don't be afraid to get those arms up. Make it harder for the quarterback to see, and when he is delivering it, just get in the way. Knocking down a pass at the line of scrimmage it could just be an incompletion, or it could turn into an interception like we saw, which set up the Steelers' second score of the game. So, just a heads-up play by the veteran. It was nice to see Bush doing exactly what the Steelers got him to do again.
Yeah, not to take away from Bush, but that was almost all Alualu. It was just more right place at right time for Bush, which you want to see. Steelers have dropped so many picks this year. We saw 2 drop picks in this game from Chicolo and Hilton. Granted, Hilton's was very hard to come down with, but regardless, it's been something that's played them. So good for him for being there and being able to actually secure it, but I give Alualu almost all the credit for that play. It was a great play from him.
100% agree with you, Austin. So in conclusion, the Steelers get a win on the West Coast. Again, they beat the Chargers. The Chargers are the only team they can beat on the West Coast, I guess. Doesn't matter if they're in L.A. or if they're in San Diego. Man, I'd really hate to be a Chargers player. That team has no discernible fan base. And like I said, I thought it was going to be maybe like an 80-20 split in terms of Steelers fans at the game. It might have been more than that. I mean, you see the pictures, you see the videos, you heard the crowd noise over the mics on Sunday Night Football. It was basically a version of a Steelers home game. They were wearing the road whites, and they were leaving on a plane. But, my goodness, that was a raucous Steelers crowd out there.
Yeah, it's just really sad. Like, looking at the audiences, like, afterward, Pittsburgh obviously had the biggest TV audience, but number 2 was San Diego, and then number 3 was Las Vegas. Like, honestly, the Chargers could have beat out the Raiders for it. They could have been Vegas's team and taken over there, but just the Chargers need to move.
They can't. They can't though. I'm pretty sure they're locked into that deal with the Rams, aren't they?
Think so. They're stuck, and they're never going to have a fan base going forward until it's really never going to come. Like I don't really know what's going to happen. Like maybe it's just going to take some young kids to grow up and be like, I want to be different. I want to be a Chargers fan, but like that's like their only.
That's still a minority, right?
Exactly. Like that's not going to grow your fan base very quickly. They're just in trouble.
They need to win a championship. I think that's really what it comes down to, or at least be better than the Rams, which, you know, the Rams haven't been great this year, but the Chargers have been worse. I don't know, man. It really sucks. I don't really know if it's going to get better when they move either, because, again, they'll be in the Rams building. Roger Goodell was asked about if he thought it was an issue, and he said it's not really an issue, and the reason why he said that is because the stadium was still full. He doesn't care who's there as long as it's full.
Exactly. It still looks good for the football as a whole, but not for the Chargers. Sucks.
It's all about what's best for business, and I hated the move when it happened, but Dean Spanos, the Chargers owner, is an idiot. And San Diego would still, I'm sure, maybe not now, but they would still have loved the team even if it wasn't doing great. Maybe not the best market in the world, but at the same time, there's no, like we've been saying, there's no fan base here. I feel bad for the players. So bad for the players.
Yeah, man. Like, all your games are away games, essentially. I mean, not every fan base travels. I mean, maybe when, like, the Browns play them or stuff like that. But, like, anytime they play, like, the 49ers, even the Rams, like, they're going to get more Rams fans there. At least I feel like. Like, it's just not, they're not in a good position. The player, if I was a player, I would never want to play with the Chargers, or really even the Rams either, but I just wouldn't want to play for Spanos, man.
It is a mess indeed, and actually, why don't we just talk about the whole Renegade situation right now, because as we know, that's the Renegade by the Sticks is the song the Steelers play when they need a big defensive stand at Heinz Field. The Chargers started playing at the first couple lines of the song, and then they ended up rickrolling the crowd, but it still got the Steelers fans into a frenzy, and it got loud, and it completely backfired on the Chargers there, and some players were very upset about it, as they should have been. That was not a smart move.
Yeah, dude. Like, honestly, that's what hurt me the most. Reading Forrest Lamb say, like, we know we have no fans here, but that hurts. Like, I was like, oh, man. Like, I feel bad for you, dude. Like, I felt so bad after that. Whoever was in charge definitely made a huge mistake. I don't know what they were... Well, obviously they're thinking, like, haha, it's going to be funny. I'm going to rickroll them into thinking it. But like you said, once it started, that's all it needs to pump a crowd of Steelers fans out. Like, it was a terrible decision. The fan base... Not the fan base. The team is just in a mess in its entirety, through and through.
Indeed, and the Chargers, to show for it, a loss at home to undrafted free agent rookie Devlin Hodges, dropped to 2-4 on the year. Yes, dropped to 2-4, and the Steelers improved to 2-4 on the year. And certainly a Sunday night football game I don't think we will soon forget. But perhaps in a few years, that Devlin Hodges trivia question might be something that we should keep in the back of our minds.
Yeah, man. It's going to be cool.
All right, let's get to Week 6 NFL action. We already covered Thursday night's game last week, so let's head into the rest of the NFL slate of action. First one, we had an early game, the London game. I hope you, Austin, and everyone was able to set their lineups accordingly in the morning, because obviously that game locked early with a 9:30 kickoff time Eastern, with the game being in London. The Panthers were able to win. It wasn't I didn't get to see the game, so I'm not going to comment too much on it, but it was bad Jameis in this game. It was an 11-point game. Kyle Allen and the Panthers continue to roll, and Jameis, despite throwing for 400 yards, tossed 5 picks. And I don't know what I'm getting with that guy from week to week. And it's the same thing as it's always been, except we've seen better Jameis at times, a little more than we're used to seeing, but he's still prone to these horrific games, too.
Yeah, it was just such a weird stat line. He ended up throwing 54 times, completing 30, had the 400 yards, 1 touchdown, and then just 5 picks. I did watch the game, and his offensive line was also terrible. Obviously, they gave up 7 sacks in this game, so, that's not great either. The one good thing about Tampa in this game is that they were able to shut down Christian McCaffrey, and they're the only team this year to do it, and they've done it twice. So, granted, take shutdown as you will, Christian McCaffrey still got a touchdown on the ground, but in terms of that, 4 for 26 in the receiving game and 22 for 31 in rushing against Christian McCaffrey this year, I'd take that. That's like the only good thing about this. And also, Kyle Allen should be the starter going forward. Don't at me.
We'll get into that in a moment, but the Panthers come away with a much-needed victory. The Buccaneers might be done in the NFC South now. Do you think they'll make a change at quarterback?
Honestly, probably should. Probably should just give up. They're done. Jameis Winston just doesn't look good. We know what he is, and it's just time. Like what is that? The 2015 class. The 2015 class just isn't what it was supposed to be. Number 1s and 2. So they're both. One already went to the bench, and I think that they need to make that move here as well over in Tampa Bay.
AFC North matchup: the Bengals and Ravens. Get started with a nice kickoff return touchdown for the Bengals, so I guess someone can return kicks against the Ravens. Danny Smith, where you at, though?
Damn, bro. Why'd you have to add him like that? Yeah, that was really sad. I was happy to see it because I was rooting for the Cincinnati to win all the way through, which, honestly, it looked like it was a possibility for a little while, but, you hate to see it.
Yeah, the Ravens only won by 6 points. I think this is exactly the final score of their Week 2 win over the Cardinals, but make no mistake about this one. The Ravens were in control of this game for most of the time. That kickoff return touchdown was a lot of the Bengals' offense on the day. They just couldn't get things going against a horrific Ravens defense, and the Bengals' offense is just so anemic, and their defense is horrendous. And I figured Lamar Jackson would have a big day, and he nearly broke the single-game quarterback rushing record against the Bengals. Did he break it? I thought he came close. I don't think he actually did break it, though.
I have no idea. He rushed for 152 yards, if that helps you. I don't actually know what the record is.
I don't remember, but regardless, if he didn't break it, he came close, and that Bengals defense is terrible.
And what's even better is they're getting worse. William Jackson's expected to miss time, and Trey Kirkpatrick is sidelined after this game. So the defense is somehow going to get worse.
You hate to see it. You love to see it, but you also hate to see it.
I hate to see it because they verse the Ravens again in, I think, two weeks, but
What you going to do? The Seahawks went into Cleveland, and the Browns put up a much better fight this week than they did last week, but it ultimately wasn't enough. Russell Wilson putting together an MVP-caliber season, leading the Seahawks to a 32-28 victory over the now 2-4 Browns, who are tied with the Steelers for second place in the AFC North.
Yeah, man. I told you. I thought this one was going to be close. The Seahawks were without their 2 starting offensive linemen. Didn't matter for the run game, though. If Baker Mayfield wasn't trash, Browns probably actually win this one. But, I guess you could say that for a lot of teams if their quarterback wasn't trash. But Nick Chubb is a beast. Nick Chubb continues to be a beast. He's one of my favorite running backs in the league right now. And, honestly, I was surprised that Cleveland's line was able to hold up so well. Cleveland didn't give up any sacks in this game. I don't know if you knew that. But, really, just great play, and I still am really sad the Steelers couldn't get Ricky Seals-Jones. I'm happy with Vanette, but Ricky Seals-Jones has actually been really solid for the Cleveland Browns since getting there.
The Houston Texans go into Arrowhead and knock off the Kansas City Chiefs, who have now lost 2 straight games at home. Impressive win for the Texans, the first time in Deshaun Watson's career where he's gone back-to-back weeks without being sacked. And the Chiefs, after looking like a favorite in the AFC, and maybe they still are, are suddenly very vulnerable with Patrick Mahomes a little gimpy out there with, I think it's his ankle, and the Chiefs look very beatable. I mean, that offense has come back to earth a little bit, and that defense might actually be somehow worse than it was last year.
Honestly, it's incredible. Honestly, if I'm the Chiefs, I'm reeling. I nearly have lost 3 in a row. Nearly only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, I suppose, but if it weren't for the refs, they would have lost the Lions, meaning they would have lost to the Lions, then they would have lost to the Colts, and then they would have lost to the Texans. Brent, that didn't happen. That's not the timeline, but they're very close. And honestly, I'm pretty sure teams have found out how to stop Patrick Mahomes from going off. I mean, granted, he still had 3 touchdowns on the day and only 1 interception, but keeping him to 273 yards, like, going to, like, week 2 was
That's a victory. That's a victory.
That's a victory, exactly. Apparently all you need to do against Patrick Mahomes is play a lot of man coverage effectively, which, granted, is a hard task, but the Lions started it. And
keep him in the pocket, too.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Keep him in the pocket, too. If you make him make those throws in the pocket, he's easier to beat.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, teams have figured it out, at least a little bit. So they're gonna, their offensive coordinator, I believe his name is Benemi or something like that.
The enemy.
Yeah, that one. He needs to start, like, working around it. I mean, it doesn't help that that team is pretty beat up right now. They lost Chris Jones, which is probably their best defensive player. Their big addition in the offseason, trading for Frank Clark from the Seattle Seahawks, has done nothing for them. I've seen a lot of Kansas City fans being pissed off because he's done nothing for them. I don't like their running situation. I mean, LaShawn McCoy is 8 for 44 in this game, but, like, I'm just still not a fan of it. It's not something that they can lean on. It's not something they had to lean on, to be fair, but I don't trust it. They just lost Eric Fisher, not for the year, but at least for Thursday. He's already been ruled out. They don't have Eric Fisher. They didn't have Sammy Watkins in this game. Just, I don't know, man. This team is reeling, and it's not looking good. And I just don't feel good about Kansas City right now. And I just feel like we're going into another year where, oh, look, Patriots are in the Super Bowl again, and this is going to be fun.
I'm definitely concerned about the Chiefs as well. 2 teams that should have, that by comparison, should have a lot more to be concerned about. The Washington Redskins and Miami Dolphins, a game that no one should ever have to be subjected to. Actually got interesting when Ryan Fitzpatrick fired a touchdown pass in the waning seconds to make it a 17-16 game. The Dolphins decide to go for it, and conspiracy theorists will tell you Kenyon Drake purposely dropped the 2-point conversion to allow the Dolphins to lose so they wouldn't screw up their tank job. And the Redskins walk away barely with a 17-16 victory, their first of the season. Wow. So much and yet so little to say about this game.
That game was terrible, dude. I don't know if you watched any of it. I watched some of it, and I was just like, I don't know why I did this to myself. I was very upset with myself for even attempting that.
I watched it at the very end when Fitzpatrick threw that touchdown, and I think I told you before, I laughed when I saw Kenyon Drake drop it, and then I remembered it could have been 3 fantasy points. But I remember the emotion Fitzpatrick showed after the touchdown. He was, like, jumping all around, and he was doing that high-stepping, like, crazy, like, eye-bugged sort of look like he had against the Steelers last year. I don't know if you remember the specific GIF I'm talking about.
Yeah, I remember.
He was all amped up, and he did that again, and I was like, oh, man, there's Fitzmagic again. And then right after Kenyon Drake dropped it, he's just walking calmly back to the sidelines looking all disappointed. And I'm like, yeah, that about covers it.
Yeah, that's about right for that game. Just a load of disappointment.
A load of disappointment could also describe the NFC East, and specifically the Philadelphia Eagles. They go into Minnesota and give up 38 points to Kirk Cousins, who 2 weeks ago, after getting a ton of scrutiny, has come out and has played well the last 2 weeks, and the Vikings beat up on the Eagles in Minnesota by the tune of 38-20.
I don't really know what to think of the Eagles anymore. They're underperforming by far, and it's just like, I don't know, like, you beat the Packers, but then you lose so badly to Kirk Cousins and Minnesota, like, I don't really know. I mean, they did a good job of containing Dalvin Cook, but that doesn't matter if you're going to let the other running back go off for 14 carries, 53 yards from Madison. And, I mean, that's not even the start of the show. The start of the show is Stephon Diggs. If Minnesota is trading him, they probably just got, like, the biggest boost to the send-off. Obviously, really, one game never is going to add value to a player like that, but 7 receptions for 167 yards and 3 touchdowns is a pretty good way to add value, in my opinion. But honestly, I don't even know who's going to come out of the NFC East. Honestly, at this point, you could sell me on the Giants making it, because I felt like the Giants played like a good 2 quarters against the Patriots on Thursday, that honestly they could probably make it, and they're only 1 game back, I believe.
They are just 1 game back of these 2 teams. Well, we'll get to the Cowboys in a minute, but the Eagles, all you have to do is throw the ball on their defense, because they are starting guys that should be on practice squads.
That's why. This is why Eagles would have really, really loved to have Ramsey. I think it would have made sense. They're not a team that's super far out of it, because they're actually basically tied for... Actually, I'm pretty sure they lead their division now that I say it.
They're tied for the lead.
But do they have the tiebreaker? They do, right?
I don't know. They haven't played the Cowboys yet, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're right. But regardless, anyway, it's a team that would get better with Jalen Ramsey 100%, and it's a team that could still make the playoffs. Like, they're not that the Rams are out of it. No team is ever out of it this early, for the most part, unless you're like the Bengals or the Dolphins. But it's just, this team really needs a cornerback really bad, and what's his face? Darby hasn't been in. Darby wasn't in. I'm pretty sure he's injured at the moment.
He is injured. Yep, he's injured too. Maddox is injured.
Even when he was playing, though, he wasn't in. Like, no. He wasn't. Their secondary has been bad all year. Just all year.
The New Orleans Saints go to Jacksonville and come away with a 13-6 victory in a line that I thought should have been favored the other way for the Saints. The Saints were road underdogs and come away with the win in a pretty good defensive battle. Gardner Minshew had no answers for the Saints defense.
Yeah, honestly, it was a pretty good game. I didn't watch a lot of it, but I was happy, and like you said, I really expected the Saints to just be favored. Like, I know people are still not over just Teddy Bridgewater starting. Like, I get it. It's a big fall-off from Drew Brees, but the team is so complete as a whole. They got 2 good running backs in Latavius Murray and Alvin Kamara. They got a pretty solid defense. They got some good receivers in Michael Thomas and Jared Cook. You know, I don't know. I feel like the team is so complete, and they're getting disrespected for that.
In a matchup of 2 disappointing teams, the team that is perennially, at least the last 2 years or 3 years, has been more disappointing, lost out in the end. The Arizona Cardinals came away with a 34-33 victory over the Atlanta Falcons, who had a chance to tie things up in the closing minutes, but Matt Bryant missed the point after attempt. And the Falcons, I think we can say the Falcons are out of it. They're done. They are over with, and I'd be shocked. I know that the owner, I'm forgetting his name, said that Dan Quinn wasn't going to get fired. He's going to get fired at some point, even if it's at the end of the season. It's it for him, man. It's over.
Yeah. On the plus side, and Arthur Blank was his name, by the way.
Yeah.
On the plus side, Kyler Murray looked great. I mean, it wasn't against the greatest defense in the world, but I mean, he threw 3 touchdowns and no interceptions, and I thought that he did really well. I'm a big fan of Murray's. I'm still rooting for him, and I hope he continues, because I think that he's actually a good quarterback, unlike the running back in Baltimore, but that's beside the point.
The Los Angeles Rams struggled on offense as the San Francisco 49ers moved to 5-0 with an impressive showing against the Rams in LA. A 20-7 final score where the 49ers did just enough offensively, and they held Jared Goff and the Rams offense in check. Goff just 78 passing yards, a net of 48 when you factor in the 4 sacks, and the Rams had no answers. They couldn't get anything going, and it was, the Niners are just, they have to be one of those teams, and the Rams, now you have questions about them.
The Rams were always gimmicky to me. I knew that coming into this year that they weren't going to be able to continue doing what they're doing without Todd Gurley's help. And so I felt really, I came into this game thinking that the 49ers are going to probably destroy them, and that's basically what I got. I mean, 20-7 isn't exactly destroying on paper, but, I mean, Jared Goff threw for 78 yards, a 1.1 QBR, you know? So, I don't like this Rams team. Like, I felt like they were running out of, like, because they relied so heavily on Todd Gurley last year, and once Todd Gurley got hurt and had that arthritis in his knee, I came into this year thinking that two teams every year that made the playoffs the previous year don't make it, and the Rams look like that team, and it's not that far. It's not that far that a Super Bowl team doesn't make it. The year after the Panthers and Broncos made it, neither the Panthers or Broncos made it. Literally the next year, and granted, there's different circumstances, but you know, I don't like this Rams team. I don't think adding Jalen Ramsey did really anything with Akeem Talib going to IR, and it's just they're in trouble going forward. Like, I just don't feel good about them. Like, especially since they have to pay Cooper Kupp eventually. His payday is coming soon, and he's been one of the best wide receivers in the league so far this year. But, you know, this 49ers team is legit also. They're just so effective with their players. I said it when they versed the Steelers. They know how to use their running backs. They know how to use them effectively, and just I'm jealous of that. Like, they have such a very good rotation. Not to poop on James Conner or anything, but like I enjoy what they're doing there, even with their banged up offensive line.
You know what's interesting? Someone, I can't remember who, maybe it was you. Were you the one that told me you thought that the Rams offense without Todd Gurley is very similar to the Bears, and that it's a lot of just smoke and mirrors, and eventually teams are going to see through that?
That was not me, but it's about what I echoed, because basically I don't trust in Jared Goff, and I knew that McVay's play calling was only going to last for so long until the team caught on.
You want to hear some frightening stats if you're a Rams fan? I'll give you two real quick. Number one, yards per pass. Now this is included in your net passing yards, so he passed for 74, but the net was 48. 1.7 yards per pass.
Yeah, you really hate to see that, Chief.
And then number two, combined third and fourth down efficiency, a whopping 0 for 13.
Oof. Yeah, that's actually terrible, dude.
You can't get worse than that. I mean, you can, but you can't get worse than 0%, and that's where the Rams were on Sunday. Oh man, this game really bothered me, Austin, because all day I was telling Will, I was telling my friends that even though Sam Darnold was back, that Jets team is so awful, I still would have taken the Cowboys to win by 20, and they went out and they laid the biggest egg, and the Jets actually went out and looked like, you know, a legitimate team. I just want to say the Cowboys and the NFC East are just frauds, and I don't like them. I don't appreciate it.
I honestly am surprised. I was one player away from picking the Jets plus 8.5. I said it. I was one player away. If they had C.J. Mosley, I was going to do it. But honestly, I guess it didn't matter. That's not what they needed. Honestly, everything just went off. Like, they were able to use their wide receivers effectively. Like, we saw him throw 2 touchdowns, one to Robbie Anderson and one to, I forget his name, Griffin, I believe. But regardless, and then you just look at the stat lines with the wide receivers, like there's an immediate improvement. 5 for 125, 6 for 98, 4 for 62. Those are their top guys. It's just really, they really were able to change with Sam Darnold there. And Cowboys, I thought were fake on offense. I thought they had an okay defense, but I don't know anymore. I don't really know what to think anymore with NFC East.
Jerry Jones said Jason Garrett's job is safe. I tend to believe him, but I don't know that I do after the season. That might change.
Yeah, it might be time to move on from Garrett.
So we have 3 teams that looked hot at the beginning of the year and now have cooled off. So we've got the Chiefs, the Rams, and the Cowboys. So let's rank these 3 teams, you and me, real quick here, in terms of the teams that you feel most confident, like most to least confident in order that they will turn it around or can turn it around a little bit.
Okay, so I'm going 100% Chiefs number 1. I think Chiefs are easy for that because they're an injured team. There's no doubt about it. They still got Patrick Mahomes, who's been doing great, but I mean, what they need to do is be able to scheme around these new man coverages that they're versing that's really messing up Patrick Mahomes. And they also just need to get healthy. I mean, you need Eric Fisher on your line. You need Sammy Watkins to be playing as your number 2 wide receiver. Not that DeMarcus Robinson or McCole Hardman are bad behind Tyreek Hill, because Tyreek Hill had a good game, but Sammy Watkins just a little bit better. And then you need to establish more of a run game there, so figure that out there. And then just you need Chris Jones back. That's period. Chris Jones is their best defensive player by far, I think. Even though Honey Badger is there, their defense, they don't have the cornerbacks, in my opinion. Oh, they're good. Their only good quarterback is hurt too, Fuller. That's their only good cornerback, and he's injured going into the game against the Broncos. So they're just an injured team. So I think they're going to turn around. Now, it's tough by definition of turning it around. I probably have Rams, but by definition of making it to the playoffs, I'd much rather bet my money on Dallas. So, because that whole division is a mess. Meanwhile, the Rams division is absolutely monstrous. They got the last undefeated team in the NFC. They got a team that's 5-1, and then they're there at 3-3. So, in terms of if they could perform better, now honestly, I'm going to pick Dallas because Rams are a very injured team as well. But the problem is they're very injured with guys not coming back. The Josh Johnson injury going to IR. That's terrible for them. Losing Todd Gurley for probably 1 or 2 games, terrible for them. Losing Akeem Talib to IR for 8 weeks, likely to come back, but 8 weeks, terrible for them. It's just, I'm going to pick that Dallas has the better chance to turn it around. With that being said, it's just, that's just how I see it. What do you think here?
I'm going to go with the exact same as you. Of course, I'll start from the bottom up this time. Like you said, the Rams have the toughest division right now, and they're in the deepest hole because they've already lost divisional game. They've lost a divisional game. Have they lost 2? Oh, yeah, 2. They lost to the Seahawks.
Remember?
Yeah, yep. So they've lost divisional games, including 1 at home. That's tough, especially when you consider they've got the last unbeaten team, and they've lost already to the Seahawks as well. That's going to be a tough hill to overcome, plus all the injuries and the lack of success recently. The Cowboys, like you said, that division is weaker. Even though I think they're just paper tigers, I think they have a better chance of turning it around if once Amari Cooper gets healthy. And then, of course, I have the Chiefs at the top. I trust their quarterback the most, and I trust their system. I trust that they'll be able to figure it out.
That makes sense to me.
All right, Tennessee Titans come away with the Denver Broncos, I should say, come away with the 16-0 victory over the Tennessee Titans and their lifeless offense, and another snooze fest that gives the Broncos their second win of the season after starting 0-4.
Yeah, so the Chiefs and the Broncos, same division, trending in the opposite direction. Denver's won 2 in a row. Chiefs have lost 2 in a row now. So, honestly, if Denver's offense could just figure out a rhythm, they'd actually probably be a solid team going forward. It's just that their offense is now holding them back. It was the defense at first, no sacks for 3 weeks and no turnovers for 3 weeks. But, now the defense has come alive. They've done way better. And they found a guy that's been really, really good for them, actually, in the middle of the field. He might have been a steal. I think he's an undrafted free agent rookie. But Dino Johnson, I think his name is Andy, actually, or Andrew, but they call him Dino in Denver. Absolutely monster over the past 2 games. He had 1.5 sacks in this past game against Tennessee. He had an interception last week. He had led the team in tackles both weeks. It's only been 2 weeks, so you can't make any real harsh judgments here, but they might have found that they had a problem in the middle of the field with their injuries, like having Josie Jewell. Even though I loved him, he's just way too slow out there. But Johnson's more athletic, and he's done really well for them. So their point being, their defense really came alive. They had 7 sacks against Tennessee. That's absolutely insane. And I was just like I said, if Denver could just figure out their offense, if they could just get better there, because they got the running back to do so already. Phil Lindsay has been great, and Royce Freeman is also pretty good, in my opinion. It's just Joe Flacco needs to be better, and that's it. Joe Flacco on the line, I should say. The line isn't good for them. But, I mean, the line only gave up 1 sack in this game, so take that as you will.
All right, and then wrapping up the week, we have the Monday Night Football game, and we're going to hopefully have a roundtable discussion with Will about this later in the week, about the officiating in the NFL and the way this game went down. The Lions jumped out to an early lead. The Packers were able to come back, and aided by a very questionable, to say the least, illegal hands to the face on Trey Flowers, who was called for that penalty twice after never being called for that in his entire life. Fun fact. The Packers were able to kick a game-winning field goal in the closing seconds, and this was after Jamal Williams purposely didn't score a touchdown either, which would have allowed the Packers to cover. And here we are. Officiating, once again, is at the forefront of the NFL world.
It is just so bad. The Lions got screwed 2 weeks in a row by officiating. That's terrible. I was texting John earlier today, but my favorite conspiracy theory is that's going around is that the NFL for season 100 wants a repeat of season 1 Super Bowl with the Packers and the Chiefs, since the Lions got screwed on both those. Obviously, the Chiefs have lost the past 2 in a row, so I don't know how much that conspiracy theory holds up, but it's my favorite one that's going around.
Do you even want... I mean, I guess we should save this discussion for our roundtable later in the week or next week, but what can or could be done to improve this black eye on the NFL?
I think refs... I'm pretty sure I literally said this last podcast. Refs need to be held accountable in some way or form. Because there's no penalty to being bad. There's no penalty to being bad. You saw one guy get fired 1 year ago or 2 years ago. That's it. That's the extent of being a ref can be. And I don't even know if it was over that, because it felt like that guy had only made one bad call. Meanwhile, there's tons of refs that are making bad calls multiple times a week. But regardless, there needs to be more standardization. The refs need to be... I don't know, man. The refs just need to be more on page with each other. I went over this... I won't go too far into it again, because I went over this exact same thing, but they're not on the same page. Every single crew is not on the same page. It's calling based on what they feel with their head referee. And I blame that on Riveron. And I said that last week. And I think that they need to move on from him. And then I know that you have some, ideas from the AAF. So let's hear about those.
Well, the first thing is that, like you said, it starts from the top, and you need more uniformed and streamlined consistency. And that means, human nature, you're going to have some variations, some variance, but you shouldn't have, at the end of the year, you shouldn't have, say, one crew is called only 100 penalties and another crew is called 200. That's too much of a variation. You need it to be closer to the median of, say, 150. You want certain penalties. It's tough because some of them are judgment plays and it's going to happen, but when in doubt, you need to have some more uniform consistency, and then beyond that, I don't like that there's no media that gets to ask questions to the officials. There's one one person that interviews the officials, or one head official in private. If they're going to be impacting games like this, they need to be brought out to the forefront. They need to face the music. That's one way to put it. And like you said, there needs to be accountability, and I think that's one way of helping it. And for another thing, this was the hit to I think it was the hit on the defenseless receiver where Tracy Walker couldn't have done literally anything else. He was going for the ball and accidentally hit I think Geronimo Allison in the head and got called for a penalty for that. That's a situation where I feel like a sky judge, like what the Alliance of American Football had, would have been the perfect that would have been perfect, because he would have been able to look at that in real time, real quickly, and could have looked at the replay before the call would have even been made and could have said, guys, this is not the proper call, pick up the flag. And maybe, in theory, Al Riveron could do that from New York, but I feel like it would be a much more streamlined process if you have a sky judge in place. Would I be wrong in thinking that that would make sense?
No, I like the sky judge. They think the problem is they think it'll have too much power, but like it really, really won't. It's going to be fixing egregious calls that are bad. I don't know. I like the sky judge idea. I thought it worked well in the AAF, and that the NFL should be using all this power to fix the officiating problem that they most certainly have.
Well, regardless, it's not simple, and we'll have more time to talk about it on the Steelers bye week next week.
Yes, sir.
All right, some Steelers news to get into. We already talked about L.T. Walton returning to the Steelers. He's going to wear number 95. Remember, he was previously 96, but Isaiah Buggs is now number 96.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I honestly didn't have anything else to say. I was just going to say, sucks for him, but I mean, he's returning to this team after like 10 months of not playing, so you got to deal with what you got.
Because Paxton Lynch and Trey Edmonds were called up to the active roster, the Steelers signed running back Tony Brooks-James and offensive lineman Christian DeLauro to the practice squad, and they re-signed those guys because, Austin, the Steelers had one of their players claimed off of waivers for the third time this year. I can already feel your blood boiling. This time, it was a promising young guard in Fred Johnson from Florida. He was a top priority UDFA target for the Steelers and made the 53-man roster, but injuries forced the Steelers' hand. Johnson now joins Tuzar Skipper and Deontay Spencer as players who have been claimed off waivers from the Steelers this year. He was claimed by the Cincinnati Bengals, who had top priority in the waiver order, which I was not surprised to see at all because I've been saying since the preseason that that's where he could end up if he gets cut.
Yeah, that just pisses me off. Like, you weren't going to be able to trade him to the Bengals because obviously the Bengals had the first draft order. I mean, I actually, you know what I don't know? I don't know if it works. Does it work based on, the waiver claim goes through on Monday, right? So does it go based on your record from the last week, or does it go from your record after Sunday? Because, I mean, I was thinking it goes from the last week because I was going to say the Bengals knew they were going to have that pick, but I mean, if it goes by the after Sunday, I mean, they probably knew a good chance they were going to lose to the Ravens, and that either the Redskins or Miami was going to win. That was just a given, so there wasn't going to be competition there. But I don't know, man. Do you know how that works?
I don't. That's not something I'm very familiar with.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to go with the assumption that they knew they were going to be the first overall pick, and they knew that. So anyway, they were the first team there. You're telling me there wasn't another team in the league that was going to trade a 6 for him and a 7. There was no one. When the Bucs traded a 6 and a 7 for Gerald Hawkins, I refuse to believe that. I refuse. There's a lot of bad offensive lines in this league. I refuse to believe that at all. And the Steelers should have known their mistake. The Steelers should have known he was not going. With how offensive linemen have worked this offseason, they should have known. I don't know. That's pissed me off again. Like, they're just not doing good this year. Granted, they didn't really have a choice. Who are they going to cut? Chiklo? Medikevich? I definitely wouldn't have... Honestly, I would have been more mad about Medikevich, if I'm being honest, but regardless, that's besides the point. It's just, they should have... The whole point is that they should have traded him and got something out of it. They're getting nothing out of this. He's now at a division rival, and he might even start. He might even just get to go out there and play, and the Steelers have to play the Bengals again, and that's going to piss me off. I don't think it's going to make a difference, but it just really makes me mad.
I'm actually going to disagree with you a little bit regarding the trading, just because I feel like if you're contacting teams about trading him in this situation, they're going to know that you're going to be cutting him, and I don't think that they would have wanted him that badly. Now, we'll never know, but I don't know that you would have been able to trade him as much as you believe that could have been a possibility. But I do agree with you that they didn't really have a huge choice at this point because of who you would have had to cut. And I don't know. It sucks. It really does. But the only good thing you can say is that, Maybe maybe he, like Tuzar Skipper, will come back down the grapevine at some point.
Maybe.
But for now, the Steelers looks like they're just rolling with 8 offensive linemen. Oh, also, Eli Rogers is going to be working out for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or did rather. He could be a punt returner for them for now. Did they have an injury there, or was it just ineffectiveness at the return game?
I heard it was ineffectiveness. They wanted to change it. That's what I heard. And that's why they're bringing Rodgers in.
Alrighty then. Well, I hope he gets the job. We got a lot of NFL stuff to talk about, Austin. Where do you want to go first?
Let's start with the Rams. I mean, we kind of already talked about a little bit of it, but there's a lot to go into. There's a lot of details.
All right, why don't you take the lead, because there's a lot to unpack here.
Sure. So the Rams had quite the shakeup, as we know, especially at cornerback after their game this past Sunday. And here's the timeline. So Los Angeles Rams announced cornerback Aqib Talib is headed to IR with a rib injury Monday night. He could return in Week 15 against the Dallas Cowboys, but return is not certain this season. It does sound like they want him to return, but like we know, it's we don't know yet. Late Tuesday afternoon, the Rams trade an undisclosed 2021 draft pick to Cleveland for Austin Corbett, the 33rd pick in the 2018 draft. Literally 20 minutes after that last trade, Rams then announced they are trading quarterback Marcus Peters to the Baltimore Ravens for a 5th-round pick and linebacker Kenny Young. It was first reported as an undisclosed pick, but it broke a little bit later that it will be a 5th and Kenny Young for Marcus Peters. So they get cap relief and an extra pick so that they can make their big move. On Tuesday evening, they trade a 2020 first, a 2021 first, a 2021 fourth, and a 2021 fourth, I should say, for Jaguars cornerback Jalen Ramsey. And so there's fun facts about this. The Rams now own 3 of the Jaguars' last 6 first-round draft picks, all of which were top 5 picks in Blake Bortles, Dante Fowler, and Jalen Ramsey. And then the other fun fact is now that the Rams will now be without a first-round draft pick for 5 seasons in a row, barring an unforeseen trade. 2017, they gave up their first for Jared Goff. 2018, they gave up their first for Brandon Cooks. 2019, they traded back into the second round to Atlanta. And now 2020 and 2021 are set to be the Jaguars' picks now. So what do you make of all these moves?
Well, their defensive backfield is better with Jalen Ramsey than it is with Marcus Peters. I thought Peters is not bad, but he's more of a big play machine as opposed, he is what I thought Steven Nelson would be, a guy that will make plays, or what I thought Steven Nelson would be, a guy that makes big plays but gives up a ton of plays too. That's Marcus Peters for you. And Jalen Ramsey's obviously a lot more consistent, so I think you've upgraded there, but I don't have a ton to add about the Corbett move. I mean, it's a high pedigree guy to help improve and bolster an offensive line that struggled this year. I don't know if I like mortgaging the future like that. If you're the Rams, we talked about this off air a little bit. Mortgaging the future when you have so many guys that need to get paid in the next upcoming years. You've already paid Gurley, you've paid Donald, you've paid Goff. It doesn't make sense to not have a first-round pick for 5 years now. I feel like there's going to be something coming at some point here, and like you said, they did open up some cap space by trading Peters, but they're going to have to re-sign Ramsey soon. If they don't come away with at least a Super Bowl in this window over the next few years, this has to be viewed as a massive failure.
Honestly, it's just really bad. I totally understand trading for talent. Trading for talent that you need, it makes sense, but the problem is with the Rams is they have no cap space to do this. They are already at the edge of it with Jared Goff, Todd Gurley, and Aaron Donald. I guarantee they wish they went back and didn't do that Todd Gurley deal, but I mean, at least they got a little bit of cap relief by trading Marcus Peters, but it's still not great for them. It doesn't look very good. I mean, I guess you could count. I don't even know what to say, to be honest. It just feels like this was a mistake. Because if they let Jalen Ramsey walk after 1 year, giving up a first, and a fourth for that, that's going to look terrible. It's going to basically hide what the Texans might do by not having Laramie Tunsil have a deal. Because, I don't know, this might be even worse. Because they gave up, feels like more, but I don't know. I guess it could be around the same. Anyway, regardless, I just don't like the Rams making this trade. I think that the Chiefs could have made this trade because they have the cap room to do it, and they could definitely improve. I thought the Eagles should make it. I said that earlier. This didn't seem like the right move for the Rams here. It feels like the Rams are not going to be able to make the playoffs with how it's looking right now. It's going to be very tough to come back from down at 3-3 when the rest of their division, there's two guys in their division ahead of them. It just doesn't look good, and it didn't fix their major problem. Their major problem is offensive line, and quarterback, if to say that. So I don't know. They decided to fix their offense by adding to defense. Didn't like it. Didn't like that move.
How many wins does this improve the Rams by at the end of the year?
Honestly, probably only one. This might probably have given them one more win than would have been, because I mean they still don't have corners next to Ramsey now. I literally don't know who's going to be stepping up to play corner for them now. I really don't. Like I don't know what their depth looks like at all. Like I knew Marcus Peters, I knew Aqib Talib, but like they're both gone, obviously. So I don't know. Maybe there's honestly I just want to. While you're talking, I'm probably going to look and see, like, and decide.
Johnson's out, too. He's on IR. That's a whole new secondary that's going to be going through growing pains together.
The one good thing that I forgot that I do like, I know some of their cornerbacks. Nicole Roby-Coleman, of course, very controversial guy. Brockers, I know, I feel like he's been playing for a while.
He has.
But, like, still, the one good thing I will say, with Johnson down, Rapp is a very safe player in this draft. He was considered one of the like most guaranteed, just going to be a decent NFL player. So losing Johnson might not be as bad as it seemed. I looked at Rapp pre-draft. I forgot that they drafted him in the second round this past year, but he's a very safe player. So I don't feel as bad about the Johnson move anymore. But still, I don't like their cornerbacks. You know.
The Seattle Seahawks are going to be without Will Dissly for the rest of the year after what looks like a season-ending Achilles injury. That's a tough blow for what's been a good team this year.
Yeah, it really does suck. Will Dissly was having like a breakout year. I mean, I guess good thing they got Luke Wilson back, but I mean, now it sucks for them that they traded Vanette.
Yeah, that's one of those things that is just unfortunate for them. Carolina Panthers have a fortunate situation on their hands. A quarterback controversy. Kyle Allen has been playing very well and has led the Panthers to an undefeated 4-0 record while he's been the starter, while incumbent starter and former NFL MVP Cam Newton will return to practice after the team's bye week. Is this really going to be a difficult decision, or is the decision honestly easier to make than people are probably making it out to be?
I think it's going to be difficult for the Panthers, but I think that it should just be Kyle Allen. To me, it's easy. I haven't liked Cam Newton in a very long time, though. But to me, this is Kyle Allen's team now. If he can, try and trade Cam Newton. I honestly want them to be done with him. I really like Kyle Allen. He's more of a game manager than anything, but he doesn't lose you games. Cam Newton loses you games. If you're starting Cam Newton, that's what you're committing to. You'd rather a guy that was an MVP at one time because of the past. Like, no, you got to start Kyle Allen.
Yeah, I don't think it's you got to roll with the hot hand. That's all there is to it.
Yes, sir.
What'd you make of the Zach Brown stuff? So he said that Kirk Cousins, his former teammate, was the weakest part of the Vikings offense. They gave up 38 to the Vikings, and Zach Brown was released 3 days later. Life comes at you fast, doesn't it?
You don't put fuel on the fire. It's just not how it works. You don't ever do that. It's just a bad idea. And he got burnt. That's what happened. He got burnt because he put fuel on the fire. And honestly, just sucks. I heard he got cut literally because of his big mouth. But I mean, he'll be on another team soon. There's a bunch of teams that with reported interest, so you know.
The Patriots are expected to re-sign tight end Benjamin Watson, who was released after returning from a suspension last week because a, quote, lack of a roster spot, according to Bill Belichick. The Patriots, however, were in need of one after current starter Matt Lacoste went down with an injury. So, also, Tom Brady said he's not in the business of calling Rob Gronkowski to see if he'll return. So, take that for what you will.
All right. I mean, I honestly didn't think much of this move, to be honest.
I did not either. Did you make anything of the Rob Gronkowski, Tom Brady stuff?
No.
I did not either. Speaking of quarterback controversy, Titans head coach Mike Vrabel is in a bad position with his. He's got two guys that are not attractive options as a starter. Incumbent starter Marcus Mariota has declined in each of the previous two seasons and has been largely ineffective this year. This was finished off by a 7 for 18 performance with 2 picks last week. His answer was to turn to Ryan Tannehill, a guy who was never able to take his team to the next level, a man who has struggled a lot over the last few seasons. He was 13 of 16 for 144 yards last week, but threw a costly interception and still couldn't lead the offense to any points on Sunday. It is a grim situation, and just an update, Vrabel has named Ryan Tannehill the starter. As far as I'm concerned, they're basically the same player.
Honestly, that's what I was thinking. And all of a sudden, the Titans are in the market for a quarterback in this offseason. So it's going to be interesting. Maybe they'll trade for Cam Newton. That'd be a mistake, but that'd be funny.
That would be a mistake. I feel like if Cam Newton gets benched, he's going to retire at the end of the year.
That does seem like a very Cam Newton-esque move.
Raiders offensive tackle Trent Brown has been sued by his ex-girlfriend for what she said was multiple acts of domestic violence over the past year, and that's unfortunate to see. And the Raiders and NFL are aware of the incident, and I would assume the NFL is going to be investigating shortly here.
Yeah, man. Just don't beat up your wife or your girlfriend.
Or anybody.
Or anybody, yeah.
The former backup quarterback for the Super Bowl 50 champion Denver Broncos has retired. That, of course, is Brock Osweiler, who had a memorable but short-lived run spelling Peyton Manning in that Super Bowl season, including a memorable start against the Steelers in Week 14 of the NFL season that saw that Broncos defense yield its only 300-yard passing game of the season to Ben Roethlisberger. Osweiler followed a 4-start season with Denver that culminated in a Super Bowl with a big contract with the Houston Texans that saw him throw more picks than touchdowns. Then he was traded to the Browns, where he memorably didn't even play a single snap, where the Texans gave up a pick. Or was it the Browns? I forget exactly how that worked, but a team gave up picks. I think it was the Browns gave up a pick just to take his contract or something like that. What was that?
It was the Texans gave up a pick, second-round pick with Osweiler, so that the Browns could take his really bad contract.
That's right, yeah. And then, of course, he never played for the Browns. He re-signed with the Broncos for, I think, a year or two. And then, or it was just 1 year, and then he finally played a little bit last season with the Dolphins, leading them to a surprising win, and has now called it quits. How will you remember Brocktober, the Brock Osweiler, the Brock Lobster?
I remember him as the Brock Lobster, but I'm going to remember him as robbing the Houston Texans for about a year. That was awesome.
Yeah, I'll always remember being very upset that the Texans were going to play the Patriots that week. Because I knew the Texans had a very good team, and he was limiting them, and of course that's what happened. They kept things close with the Patriots for a while, but Osweiler handcuffed them, and it wasn't enough. And I'll never forget that game against the Broncos when he was the starting quarterback at the time. But no offense to him, but I'm happy Peyton Manning got a chance to play instead of Osweiler at the end there.
Yeah, man.
Browns defensive end Myles Garrett tweeted that he was punched in the face by a fan after the fan asked to take a picture with him. The Browns are aware of the incident. What's wrong with people, man? Leave the man alone.
I don't know, man. Like, that's just such a wuss move, too. Like, you're sucker punching him, essentially, coming at him with a punch that's, like, just out of nowhere. Like, don't be like that. That's how you get, like, guys to hate fans and, like, never interact with fans because of the bad ones.
Yeah, really just despicable, to be honest with you. Roger Goodell has responded to a bunch of questions about the new pass interference replay rule, which was passed in the offseason. His thoughts on the matter are as follows. It is what we anticipated. You know what that tells me? That tells me the NFL planned all along for it to be essentially a waste of time for teams to challenge it so that they can say at the end of the year, look, we tried this and it didn't work, and they're just going to take it away because they don't like that fans pressured them into doing something.
That does seem like what has happened here. They just wanted to say it didn't work and move on.
Even though the reason it didn't work is all because of them.
Exactly. Blame someone else, though. You know?
So now the NFL owners are pushing for a 17-game season, which I think would be honestly kind of interesting because I think you would only lose one preseason game, which would keep it at 3, which is what I would like. But that 17th game means you would always have either a winning or a losing record, barring ties, of course. And it would open up the possibility of a neutral site location game for every team, which I find interesting. What do you think about that?
See, I didn't know that last part. That last part is really cool. They give, like, a place, like, that doesn't normally get an NFL game, like, a chance to get it back. Like, maybe you have a throwback San Diego game for the Chargers so they feel a little bit better and actually get a home game. But regardless, it'd be cool. You count maybe, like, the London games for that. You can possibly explore the idea of going to, like, another country like Ireland. I feel like there was a game played in Ireland once, probably. I think by the Steelers.
It was back in the day. I think the 90s and early 2000s. Yeah, they were also talking about China, but it hasn't happened yet, obviously.
Yeah, I don't feel good about that right now. But
yeah, no, certainly not now.
Yeah. Regardless, I think it'd be cool. It's too bad that Dan Rooney has since passed, but obviously he was like the ambassador of Ireland. That would have been cool for the Steelers to get a game there or something. But yeah, I like that idea. I like the 17th game season at a neutral site. But, I mean, some teams, I can already tell some teams are going like, that's not fair. Because, like, teams that travel more are going to do better. Like the Steelers, wherever that they go, is going to be better because they're a seasoned franchise than, like, let's say, I don't know, the Chargers. Like, the Chargers, unless they go back to San Diego for that one game, are not going to have fans traveling, really.
Nope. Last bit of news, the Raiders have signed tight end Darren Waller to a 3-year deal, expected to be around $9 million a year. He was heading into restricted free agency at the end of the year. He's played pretty well this year. People have forgotten about Jared Cook already.
Yeah, man, he's done really well. They were mad about letting Jared Cook go, too, but I think it's worked out. I feel like Jared Cook has been less effective with New Orleans than he was effective in Oakland. So, I mean, I feel like it worked out for Raiders here.
I would agree with you on that aspect. All right, let's move to Week 7, Chiefs at Broncos. Chiefs are getting 3.5 on the road. They've been sliding while the Broncos have been hot. This is a low-key, sneaky good AFC West matchup. So, as of Monday night, it was a 3.5-point spread. I'm going to double-check right now to make sure that's still correct. How you feeling about this game?
So, I'm thinking that this game is going to be close. I feel like Denver's a team on the rise, and Chiefs are a team that have been falling. And my one concern is that the offense of the Denver Broncos isn't going to come through. I am still, however, going to take Denver plus 3.5 if that's a spread. Did you find that yet?
It is still 3.5 according to ESPN.
Cool. I'm going to take Denver plus 3.5 here. Every Chiefs-Broncos game feels close. It doesn't really matter what the teams look like. And honestly, I feel good right now because the Chiefs are reeling and the Broncos are on the rise. I mean, they did it against not-so-great teams. The Chargers aren't great and stuff. But I was actually literally looking at this today because I have a Broncos fan friend and we were talking about it. And we were just talking about how the games go down and what they need to do in this game. And I like their chances. I like their new guy, Johnson, because my biggest concern with the Chiefs, and this is what I was talking about earlier, is Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. It's not, as dumb as that sounds, it probably should just be Patrick Mahomes. But it's the idea that Tyreek Hill scares me in any quarterback matchup because he's just so fast. And he's good enough where he's not like John Ross where he just uses speed, but speed is enough to get past any cornerback no matter how good. And I don't like Chris Harris Jr. outside the slot. He's a very, very good in the slot, but trying to move him around with Tyreek Hill, I don't like him as much. And so the problem with Hill is you need to respect him over the top with a safety. But that's where Travis Kelce comes in, because you also need to either have a big corner, a very good man coverage safety, or an athletic linebacker to be able to cover Kelce. And Dino Johnson might be that guy for them, because they need that safety for Tyreek Hill. But Johnson is an athletic linebacker that could possibly be the one to match up on Kelce, and it's one of the guys they need. Obviously, this is not as simple. I'm making it way simpler than it is. This is not what's going to happen every play, but I feel good about the Broncos. I think that they could even win this game. I'm going to take Denver plus the 3.5, knowing that the games are kept close pretty often. So, what do you got in this game?
Normally, I would take the home team on Thursday night. That's usually how I roll, but I said this last week and it bit me in the backside, but I think this time the Chiefs are going to come up with a victory, and I think they'll win by a touchdown. So I think even shorthanded, it'll be enough to win over the Broncos, who have 2 wins in a row, yes, but against unimpressive teams in Los Angeles against the Chargers, which, not really a road game, and against the Tennessee Titans, who suck. So, I'm sorry, I think they suck, but so I'm going to take the Chiefs in a close 20. I'll say it's a 27-20 game. So I'll take the Chiefs to cover.
Yeah, that's good. The Broncos have lost their last 7 against the Chiefs, with one going in overtime. Only, I think, if I'm counting this correctly, only 2 were within 3.5. It was 1 in 2016, which I was a different team, and then 1 in 2017 was within 3.5. But that's it of their last 7 games they played.
Next week, the Steelers are on a bye week, so we'll have, kind of like mid-season talk about where this team is this year and kind of our thoughts compared to where we were at the beginning of the year and where we think the team is going, and be on the lookout. We're hoping to do a roundtable discussion about the NFL and officiating sometime this week, so stay tuned for that. Austin, thank you so much for joining me. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions about the show, please feel free to check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. You can find our various social media platforms and our email. If you have any questions about the Steelers or the show you want to ask, please feel free to check it out on our website and ask us via email. So, again, thank you so much for listening, and have a terrific night, everybody.
Have a good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.